So you create efficiency, but also if you're using some sort of a scanning technology, you're getting the exact right product. There are no mistakes when the QR codes are being read and the bot is selecting the exact product off that shelf. So the picker just knows, oh, that is the right product. I put it into my tote. I put the tote on the conveyance, and then it goes out to the customer. That's how that would work.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite, and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
On this episode of Power Supply, we will speak with Pete Bennett, Senior Vice President, Global Supply Chain for Cardinal Health's Global Medical Products and Distribution business. I had a chance to speak with Pete back in August. We met for the very first time at the ARM annual conference. We'll kind of talk a little bit about that as we get started with the interview. And I am on my own today. Hayes and Gary both have the week off, so they're not in-house, but we have got a phenomenal guest. I'm going to take this one solo. We're going to be talking about automation opportunities in healthcare. Like, imagine a touchless supply chain, and how does all these different types of automation help the healthcare supply chain run more smoothly and ultimately impact safety. And safety is going to mean a couple of things in this conversation today. So stick with us and you'll hear how to successfully implement some best practices and a good overview of the applications that are out there that are emerging and why now is the time to begin building automation into your healthcare supply chain. We'll be right back with Pete Bennett after a short break.
I'm Hayes Walder.
This is Gary Skinner.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Power Supply.
Joining me now, Pete Bennett, Senior Vice President, Global Supply Chain for Cardinal Health's Global Medical Products and Distribution business. Pete, you and I had a chance to meet at the ARM annual conference last August. We recorded an ARM podcast together. And for anybody out there listening to the Power Supply podcast, we do release, or co-release, I should say, all of the ARM subject matter expert podcasts, as well as the ARM update and then the conference interviews. And Pete was one of those conference interviews this year. And Pete, you did a fantastic job, but we only had about 15 minutes to talk. And so I reached out, talked to some people on your team and said, how about we have a little bit longer form discussion on Power Supply? And I'm really glad to have you today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
So you're going to be touching on something today that I think I'm only just starting to hear about, some real transformational moves in this regard, but I'm hearing these conversations happening, and it's really around automation opportunities. But automation can mean a lot of things, right? Automation isn't necessarily, physical automation, like people often think of robots. Sometimes it can be interoperability. Sometimes it can just be software and, obviously lots of conversations around AI. And so, we can talk about all that today, but really one thing that we're trying to figure out is how do we remove all of the touches that are either manual or just require manual review that are really bogging down a supply chain that is definitely dealing with some staffing challenges right now. And, even as we kind of get into that, why, I obviously named one, but what other reasons do you think there are for driving towards like this automation other than the human resources need?
Yeah, I think When I think about how we can leverage automation and technology to our advantage, I really start to think about quality, costs, and safety. And quality doesn't just mean the quality of the products or the condition of the products that you're going to be putting into somebody's hand, but it also means the accuracy of what you're shipping out. Is it available when we said it's going to be available? Is it in the right place when we said it was going to be in the right place? As well as the efficiency that's related to ensuring that you have a distribution network that is putting product out to a customer or out to a business partner or a trade partner in an efficient manner. As well as when you think about the physical automation of the supply chain, ensuring that you're operating safely. And so if you think about where you have a lot of reach or you have heavy carts that you're pushing around, well, robots do a really good job of that. They work alongside employees, and it helps to improve the morale, but also improve your output from a efficiency perspective.
So, I went a little out of order on purpose because I wanted to tee it up a little bit and then come back to you on kind of your role in your organization. So when I introduced you, obviously you oversee quite a bit. And as a senior vice president for global supply chain, right, for Cardinal Health, everybody is familiar with Cardinal Health, but how much of the work that you're doing at Cardinal Health revolves around this, and maybe talk a little bit about just your own personal interest and career arc that's brought you to this point today too.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think what we're trying to do here is drive automation throughout the entire healthcare ecosystem. And for me, where I think about my background, I came from the Department of Defense. So thinking about a true planning, logistics, supply chain background, which you're kind of using a little bit of grit, but a lot of factors of scalability to be able to get products where it needs to go around the world. I've taken that same approach when I think about the private sector and how you're able to leverage different types of technologies to your advantage. And that's something that drives me. That's my passion, right? And so in three main ways, I think about this. The first is anywhere I can automate the physical aspect of the movement of product. And so that's where we start to talk with things about robotics or innovation labs that help us figure out in a sandbox environment what we want to do, or the different types of data analytics that can advise how we want to move products around the system. The second is really that system automation. So when I think about leveraging advanced technologies, this is where machine learning or robotic process automation comes in, or leveraging tools or systems to help plan your labor or plan the widgets that are going to move through your facilities. That's that system automation, so getting a good planning system. And then the third is thinking about improved performance. I have to think about that all the time. I lead the supply chain for a large movement of goods all over the world. So thinking about quality and consistency, speed and efficiency, and then providing predictable results for our customers, those are the three things that really drive what I do and what I'm responsible for here at my business.
And, you just talked about safety. And, I don't think people connect automation to safety very often. But, we've had a lot of conversations on the podcast, with senior leaders about how do they connect either newer employees or employees that are, maybe more in the loading dock and far removed from the actual patient themselves. I mean, it's one thing to be in OR materials and you're kind of in there, you're working side by side with the clinicians, but then there's other aspects of supply chain where you don't even get exposed to the clinicians, very much. And so how do we connect them to that safety piece? And I'd like you to connect the dots on how automation, maybe more deeply can have an impact on, you talked about kind of like the providers and the staff, having more confidence and just like they can be happier. But let's go that one step further to really the mission of healthcare and the patient that's receiving the care. How does automation help them?
Yeah, start with the patient and whatever procedure they're going to receive, whether it is a small surgery or some sort of treatment for disease state in the acute care setting. We got to start there and work our way back. And what we look at as an industry is we think about ways to ensure that at each step that there could be a touch point, that some sort of technology, whether it be a visual detection, a weights and dims metric, a piece of AI that is suggesting that there should be some sort of component removed or added to a kit or a solution, we've got to use all those technologies to ensure that the right product is going to be available at the exact right time that the customer needs it. Some supply chains are getting very, very, very short. And so if you think about maybe somebody who is in need of oncology treatment, and there is a nuclear pharmaceutical drug that needs to be imported in order to satisfy that requirement, from prescription to import is a very short lead time as the isotope continues to degrade. So you've got to be able to have all of the systems and tools and technologies in place to be able to make split-second decisions on how you're going to move it, where you're going to move it, and when it's going to arrive. And oh, by the way, it has to be the right density, the right product, the right patient, and it's only got 48 hours to do it. And so in leveraging all those different types of tools or technologies, the right ones at the right time is really what you have to look at. But you got to always reverse engineer it, starting with the customer and the patient, the disease state that you're trying to help support, and then work your way backward.
So let's start to dive into like these different examples and categories. We talked about categories of automation. I'd like to just give some concrete examples of each one because I think everybody kind of has an idea, generally speaking, but I almost think sometimes when you dive in to giving the specific examples, somebody, when they get to the detail level, goes, "Oh, I didn't think about that with robotics." And so, I really want to kind of expand on that a little bit before going into like what implementation looks like and, how the environment is changing that might be increasing the utilization of automation. And so we've got three here: robotics, systems, hardware, and then software. And so one thing, though, that I got introduced to as we were preparing for this interview was goods to person technology. And I've not heard that term before. So I'd love for you to start by defining that, maybe giving some examples and then broadening back out to robotics on the whole.
Yeah, I'll start with that. So that will fall in our robotics hardware solutions that we're taking a look at as an industry and really thinking about where you can eliminate the amount of movement of a person walking down an aisle, picking something off of a shelf, bringing it back to a table, maybe extracting a portion of that product out to put into a kit or to put into a tote to go on to a hospital, right? Instead, we've replaced that walking path with a robot who does that for you and brings the goods to a person who is standing at a table who doesn't then have to go back and forth to be able to do that. So you create efficiency, but also if you're using some sort of a scanning technology, you're getting the exact right product. There are no mistakes when the QR codes are being read and the bot is selecting the exact product off that shelf. So the picker just knows, oh, that is the right product. I put it into my tote. I put the tote on the conveyance, and then it goes out to the customer. That's how that would work.
It just occurred to me, there's some things that have happened recently, when I say recently, I mean over the last 15 to 20 years, some initiatives like Good ID and UDI. Is that really integral to making something like what you just described work?
Yeah, for sure. Any of those programs that were designed to give us better accuracy in what specifically was going to be in the corrugate that we've got on the shelf, and then on the inner packaging, and then at each separate unit of measure all the way through the entire bill of materials, that has enabled us to be able to use this technology to our advantage. So when you are inducting a product into a goods to person solution, like what I just described, the picker or the person who has taken the product out of the container, put it onto a table and said, okay, it's going to go into this new goods to person system. They're going to be able to take the lowest unit of measure, put it into a box, and then that box is going to sit on a shelf until a bot comes along and picks it for movement into the customer's hand. That's only possible through a UDI compliant product or a product that has some sort of technology to help visually or scannable, technology to be able to make sure that that's the right product that's going on the shelf.
Yeah, I love that because I think sometimes, we have people at all different levels of their professional careers that listen to the podcast. And I think, you sometimes when you're trying to adopt UDI, you're just experiencing the pain points of trying to adopt that, right? And you could be you could be a manufacturer that's experiencing those pain points as well, right? It doesn't even matter where your role is in the supply chain. And I think kind of connecting it to this vision, and tying it all the way back to safety and how that all fits into a big picture is really, really important. So thanks for indulging that question. I derailed us a little bit, but I'd like to move on to systems hardware like RFID technologies and what that looks like.
Yeah, RFID is really brilliant, and you can put this right into the treatment centers or an OR as well. So technologies that help you understand point of use consumption via RFID or through some other visual detection. That enables us to be very precise with what product we need to put into a truck to get to the OR, to get to the back room of a hospital. With that, you eliminate the kind of guesswork that maybe a nurse was doing. Maybe they were like double dipping and a nurse had to be a supply chain planner but also do their job. Now the nurse just has to worry about the product that's sitting on the shelf. I'm going to use it and consume it. The system already knows I've consumed it, and it does an automatic reorder, and that feeds itself further upstream into an advanced planning system, which says to your distributor now, go out and send more product to that network because they need it, because they've consumed it, or they're consuming at a rate that's going to be unsustainable. That further feeds even higher on the echelon of planning, more signals for us to buy or build. So when you start to plan more concurrent and less segregated, you actually create the efficiencies, but also you create better predictability for what's going to be on that shelf when the nurse needs it. And that's the benefit of leveraging like an RFID scanning technology in the healthcare setting, in the acute care setting.
It's so interesting, and I don't want to, there's so many rabbit holes that we could go down as we talk through this, but like one that I think is important to mention is, and because I've had a few conversations on the podcast about this as well, but you just talked about having a much better understanding of demand and demand planning. And I've had a lot of healthcare supply chain people come to me and say, why is it that in all of our contractual agreements, the penalties are on us and they're not on, the manufacturer, they're not on our partner? And I think a big part of that is because healthcare really has struggled to do good demand planning and forecasting to be able to create those KPIs with their partner, right? And so what you're talking about is actually enabling the ability to get accurate data so that demand planning and forecasting actually could be within our grasp over the next several years, where I think it's been really elusive up until now.
Yeah, it is a huge opportunity for our industry for sure. It is a gap in how we look at and think about demand planning. And it's a far gap to what I would consider multivariable demand planning, where it's not just so simple as saying, you've consumed this and I'm going to run a linear algorithm and it's going to produce this forecast and that's it. It's not that simple. And that's where seasonality plays into it. And that's where, understanding the changes of disease states throughout the entire globe plays into it. And so you've got to be a little more predictable in that space. Hospitals are not going to be able to get to that level without significant investment. And to be frank, there doesn't appear to be an appetite for that right now. So what we're seeing is distributors or trade partners are pulling that up into their echelon of planning. So what you'll get is a collaborative plan that will form a consensus based off of what I just described, which is understanding point of use consumption. So if you think about it that way, if you start with a clean item master with interoperability across your entire healthcare system, and then you understand in a very clean way, and maybe you have to use some machine learning to clean up that data, but if you get the accurate usage across that ecosystem, and then you take the formulary of the SKUs that you're using and you create a really good plan for what you're going to need to be able to support those sites, you can actually drive a ton of efficiency into and visibility into the hospital because they know what they need, they know when they're going to need it, but they don't have to worry about it because their trade partner already took care of that element of planning. And so that's where we've seen it. And to be quite frank, what it appears to me is distributors are building tools and technologies so that they can meet their customers where they're at, because the reality is there is going to be a difference between a very large hospital system and their core capabilities and some of the smaller systems and maybe the nonprofit systems that don't have as much financial access.
Yeah. Yeah. The resources are different. And, you even look at like critical access and rural hospitals, they've got some unique challenges that are very different from, large metropolitan or urban centers and health systems. So, I think you're touching on some important pieces, especially around that item master, though. I feel like if you're a smaller system, you ought to be able to cleanse that item master a little bit easier than a larger health system. And, I like what you said about kind of the machine learning and leveraging that to help clean the item master, because what a daunting task that can be for healthcare. Moving to the third one, which I think we might have even segued better than we thought on this, but talking about software, this is my particular favorite. Just interoperability, pulling data like you're talking about through a system and being a good trade partner to, help hospitals achieve that, I think is really going to be critical to healthcare success moving forward. And so on this software side, I think we can go in a zillion different directions in terms of examples of automation and software, because when you remove hardware from the equation, it's really what can you dream up from a coding standpoint, and how good is that data set, i.e. the item master, that you are going to have access to. So maybe some examples on that front.
Yeah, I'm going to start again with, if you get the most accurate product usage data, which is what we strive to do, it's going to come in two forms. Either you're going to have a technology that's going to be able to give you true point of use consumption, leveraging RFID or something like that, or you're going to get it through their purchase orders. One way or another, you're going to understand what they're consuming. But if you take that and you integrate that into an advanced planning system, there's a bunch of them out there, and you integrate their demand planning into that space, then you can create these automated workflows which either indicate stockouts, back orders, or some sort of a supply plan that'll help you look to the future of what you're going to need to make or buy. But it also gives you visibility into supply chain disruptions. And so then you can work with your trade partners to say, look, this is what we need to be able to achieve. This is maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks out. Here are some substitutes that we can offer you now. If is an acceptable clinical offering, then you can take that information, push it back into the system, create a full viable plan, create a consensus and say we're going to do that plan. And then guess what? All the product that you need was available. You had no disruption to the clinical care of whatever you're trying to treat. Planning systems are getting really smart. They're leveraging AI just organically. So when we start to say who's leveraging AI, well, if you've got some sort of advanced planning system, they're all leveraging some sort of AI, whether it is just some very organic stuff or you're adding bolt-ons. Everything is trying to give you faster ways of creating scenarios to make decisions so that you can create a better outcome. That is just organically happening. And so then you'll be able to improve the outcome of the product that you need to sit on the shelf, and then you can spend more time managing your exceptions than trying to figure out what they actually need.
Yeah, that has been a big, I'd say, buzzword for me recently, is manage by exception, because we really just can't manage by line. It's just not going to work. It never really worked the way, like perfectly, but with the pressure that healthcare is under, like you said, financial resources and financial pressures, you've got to get to manage by exception. And more so, you've got to leverage automation to start addressing those exceptions once you see the pattern, right? And I think that's a really important piece to, like, if you can get the exceptions out, then you can actually build a real strategy around it, because you can pinpoint.
Picture a world in the very near future where a planner or a manager at a hospital only has a few minutes to look at their supply plan. And they can go in their system and say, I have 5 minutes to make decisions on exceptions. Give me the top exceptions that I need to make a decision on at this moment. And the system tells you these 3 decisions need to be made today to prevent a stock out. And you can go through and do it that way. So not only are we looking at data and saying, oh, I need to figure out this exception, there's a future, and the future is now, where you can actually ask the system, what are the most important decisions I need to make today? And I only have 5 minutes to make decisions right now. What are the extreme important pieces that I need to do? It's here, it's coming, and you're going to continue to see that as we mature our ecosystem.
Yeah, I like that. Not just managing by exception, but also getting prioritization of what needs to be actioned on. That's great. All right. So I can imagine, we just went through 3 different ones. There's probably a lot of answers to this question, but I'd say let's just hit the big ones. Historically speaking, what are some challenges that really exist industry wide, regardless of size of hospital, regardless of which type of technology example of automation we're talking about? What are some of the challenges that you've seen implementing automation in the healthcare supply chain?
I think there's 2 main things, really. So the first, I would say, is that there is a bit of a resistance due to the potential for disruption. Implementing systems that always sound scary. There's always the chance that a new ERP that might be the right decision may be a little bit disruptive at first, and you've kind of got to get through that. And so if you provide enough attention and you plan it the right way, health systems that we're working with today have been able to mitigate any of the impacts of making those upgrades and leveraging advanced planning systems or automation differently. So it is possible, but I do think that could be a barrier. The second is cost. There is a cost to doing this. So entering into a space where you want to really truly leverage some of these technologies, the ROI is there. You've just got to create a business case that you can convince your leadership on that is going to enable you to be able to make that jump. That's been my experience in every version of a corporation that I've been with. It's always getting the business case through and then proving your business case. And once it's done, and we've shown that, you get a really smooth plan, and then you can then provide the benefit and credibility of what you're trying to achieve. That's what we've been doing.
Some of that strategy that on the, just as you said, being able to create that business plan, seen a lot of departments, and maybe, supply chain used to be one of these, although I think the level of experience and expertise is growing in supply chain, just as you look at like strategic sourcing and value analysis and how the sophistication of the healthcare supply chain has really evolved, especially over the last decade or so. But when you think about other support departments, how often is it that they just don't have the time to put the business plan together? They might not even have the information. And if they haven't worked at another institution where they've done a similar project, they don't even necessarily have the experience to put the confidence into the leadership. And so you were talking about how trade partners can do things to really support, the growth in healthcare. And I think what you just described is like helping build that business modeling that is then tailored to any given organization or strategy and aligning it with their mission or their strategy for the next couple of years is like, so to me, it's just such an obvious opportunity for trade partners to step in and augment.
That's right. Yeah, it's a partnership for sure. And there's benefits on both sides. And so when you work through those benefits, and it can be a different solution because tools and technology are becoming so agile, you don't have to be so stringent that my tool is this and I can't operate with your tool because it's a different one. That is not the case. The layers of technology that exist between these things, the glue that holds these together, they're very agile. And so you can go on a different journey with different trading partners and have the same results, same benefit from doing so. So it's a great time to start to experiment, but it really starts with having a discussion and asking, what are we trying to solve?
So I feel like we've talked a decent amount about maybe what's happening in the industry that's enabling automation. But I want to ask it just kind of straight out. Like I alluded to UDI, but we were, talking about a different thing at the time. And I thought maybe we could expand on it. Is just what's happening industry wide at a really high level that is enabling this automation. Because like you said, it could be, not having an ERP or having to upgrade the ERP to get to the right point. Maybe it's budget and finance, but something is changing that is making this doable. What's the big force behind that right now?
Yeah, I think it's also 2 things. One is competition. And so there are now a lot of technologies out there that offer solutions. And so you can get really creative with how you're going to apply those technologies, but the cost is starting to come down. So though I said earlier, a barrier to entry is cost, now you can leverage that access to different tools and technologies that may be solving for the same supply chain gap that you're trying to help to mitigate, but it's starting to help from an industry perspective have a different mindset on investment. And I think that's helping. And then I think the second is our workforce is changing. The workforce, as it starts to come in out of colleges and universities that have a huge focus, especially in supply chain, on leveraging automation and leveraging these types of technologies, we're starting to see a different interest in what they want to do. So employees are coming in and they want to see that you're going to be working next to a robot, potentially, or they want to be able to leverage tools and technologies to do exception management versus spending a lot of time just pulling together reports. So in our warehouses, for example, when you have a robot that's going to help you push a 500-pound cart, that's more appetizing than pushing that 500-pound cart around. And so you get to see this really interesting person and robot working together, whereas before we would have just said, roll the cart around. And so it's just changing in a way that's very positive, and people are just these digital natives that want to and expect of large corporations like ours to have these tools and technologies. It's just part of the cost of doing business now. So
digital natives, I'm putting that one in my bank. I love that. I had not
I did
heard
not
that
create
before.
that, but
Yeah, but I really like that a lot. It really describes kind of the generation that's coming in, that's grown up with, smartphones and tablets in their hands since, pretty much birth.
that's it. I mean, walk into a warehouse today and they're going to have a person who is pick, packing, and shipping is going to have a tablet in their hand. It's going to be tracking what they're doing. And up on the board is going to be a leaderboard. And there's a bit of competition. It gamifies it, but they can see who is the most efficient every single day. And that's not to meet a quota. It's not to do anything other than really help to gamify. It's something that the digital natives are used to doing with playing video games and such. We'll bring that into the workplace. It becomes fun. It's more enjoyable. And at the end of the day in the break room, they're like, well, I was better than you today or whatever. And maybe there's some incentives there, but it does change the game. It really does. And when you're thinking about where we're operating some of these warehouses around the nation, they're not always in the large metropolitan areas, right? So there may be a lot of competition for warehousing employees in rural areas.
Yeah,
so you want to be the warehouse with its cool technology, and you want to attract people with that technology, and the gamification seems to work. And we really enjoy employing folks that like to use handhelds and watch how they're performing and then simulate a little competition.
I didn't even think about the human resources implication of automation. Even when we were talking about safety earlier, it didn't even occur to me, like just the ergonomics and people out on, workers' comp from workplace injuries and things like that. Like how much, it's obvious. It just hadn't really connected it to our conversation. But then also being competitive in your market where, there are large, organizations that, definitely are pulling people out of the healthcare supply chain. And so if you're helping new grads, like you talked about from a recruitment standpoint, work with tools that are forward thinking, that are newer, that you get excited about when you're in college, it can definitely help your recruitment efforts. I can see that. There's just no doubt about it. Let's talk about best practices. We're coming up on the end here. We're packing in a lot. But what are some best practices when rolling out new technology?
Well, you heard it a bunch of times from me, and really my primary rule is collaboration. You need to have alignment with whatever problem you're trying to solve, and whether you're trying to solve a problem as a trade partner with a hospital, or whether you're trying to solve a B2B solution with one of your relationships that you've got to start with a consensus of what you're trying to solve and what type of tool you need to be able to support that. The second really is communication and communication and communication. It is sometimes a little scary to say, we're going to automate this portion of your job. And we really do intend, and we really haven't seen a lot of efficiencies gained from, this like labor management and labor out. We really are using it to improve our workforce, to improve the output of the workforce and improve the morale. And so communicating it in a way that is saying, hey, we're going to help you because you know how those really heavy cases that are sitting at the bottom of the shelf and everybody's getting these back injuries on? Well, not anymore because we got you this robotic arm and you don't have to bend over and pick it up anymore. That's a benefit to you. You can do it faster and it's intended to help improve the output of the facility. And so I think those two things, collaboration and communication, really are key to rolling out this technology.
Yeah, it's really important what you're saying there too, because a lot of those jobs can be, very hard on the body. And what is healthcare's mission? It's to provide wellness in the community. So removing the kinds of activities and job responsibilities that can lead to injury and poor health is almost like right into the exact mission of every hospital or, really any healthcare institution, whether they're acute or non-acute. Okay, so we're going to wrap this all up. I'm hoping you can tell us a story that just paints a picture of what a successful implementation or application of automation looks like.
Yeah, I think the best is really thinking about how we are reducing the employee burden through an assessment of our full ecosystem. And the best example of that we have is the new application of our advanced planning system, which at its core is AI enabled. And it essentially ensures that whether we're connecting into our warehouse management system, our labor management system, or any of the goods to person technology that we use, we now have a brain that helps to tell each of those various systems what it needs to do and when. And through that implementation and that new ecosystem that we're built, we're really able to just improve service, improve outcomes, accuracy. We've reduced our defects within our own pick, pack, and ship operation, and we get product out there. It's a path toward what we're trying to achieve, which is a fully digital supply chain with as few touches as possible so that we can continue to be accurate, improve service, and improve patient care.
A lot of times people say, to really drive change, it's got to start at home. And that's basically what you just told. You just told the story of how it started, in your work home, and then how you're bringing that out to leverage, and take those best practices forward and leverage those technologies in a proven use case, because moving inventory around is the same thing no matter where you are. There may be nuances, but you're still moving product around. And so the application of the technologies, while they might need to be tweaked, the concepts are there, and the proven uses of the technology can be extrapolated regardless of the environment. So, Pete, this was a really great interview. I'm glad I got a chance to have you on for a little bit longer discussion. This was really good. And, I think the listeners are going to take a lot from the conversation today. Is there anything you want to add on this topic? I know it's a super broad topic, and that was only like 30 minutes, 35 minutes, but is there anything that you think we kind of missed or should, say before we close out?
No, I don't think so at all. I just appreciate the time. As a distributor of healthcare products, it's our job to get the right product to the right place at the right time for patients who need them when they need them. And that's through modernizing our supply chain and working with our business partners and getting the word out just like we're doing today. And the more we can talk about it and the more comfortable it is to talk about, the easier it is for me to help to ensure that the industry is moving forward so that we can improve our customer and patient experience.
That was Pete Bennett, Senior Vice President, Global Supply Chain for Cardinal Health's Global Medical Products and Distribution business. A great conversation around automation today. I'm actually really sad Hayes and Gary missed it, because this is just really exciting stuff. It's the future of healthcare, and I think Pete really addressed what many people's primary concern is a lot of times is, wait, if we bring in the automation, is it going to remove the people from the jobs? Is it going to end up eliminating jobs? And I think we're all learning as AI is coming forward that it's really just about helping everybody do their work better. And I love the connection to safety, both patient safety and employee safety, that automation can bring, to the table, as well as actionable insights. So I think Pete did a great job today. And on behalf of Hayes and Gary and myself, thanks for listening to this episode of Power Supply.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Power Supply. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on your iPhone or Android. Simply search for Power Supply in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@powersupplymedia.net. We look forward to hearing from you.